Building a commander mana base can be daunting. If you are looking for some help on getting your 2-color commander deck all landed up, this video will give you everything you need to know. How do I know that? Well, I've combed through all of Scryfall, searching for each land that can provide you both colors of mana in a 2-color commander deck, and I will rank all the ones that I would play. Then I'll show you how to assemble a very solid mana base. If you like informative videos like this, feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you want to be a very kind person, you can check the description for affiliate links and a direct link to my Patreon. Let me start by differentiating the two types of lands that I'll be ranking. First is what I consider guild lands, which are lands that can produce either of the two colors in your commander's color identity. The second I just refer to as all, since they have the potential to create all colors of mana, but you'll only need 2 for your color identity. Now let's break down each one individually to see why I rank them the level that I do. The very end of the F tier are what I like to call the scary lands, cause ooh, they're spooky. This is because they come into play tapped unless an opponent has 13 or less life, and 13 I guess is like a scary number. These are not very good, but they are the bottom of the barrel as far as guild lands that I would run. And that's only if you happen to know your meta is pretty aggressive. You have to consider that you only run one of these in a 99 card deck and need to think about what the odds are of drawing this before one of the other players hits 13 life. Again, not great, and my personal last resort. This may ruffle some feathers, but I hate the pathways. Mostly because you don't actually have the opportunity to get both of your mana colors from these lands once they're in play. You get the choice when it's in your hand, and once it's in play, you're stuck to one color. In a lot of ways, it's no better than a basic land. Also, I have a general aversion to flip face cards in Commander. It's just that extra fiddliness of flipping these in sleeves that I would rather do without. In general, lands that come into play tapped are not great. However, of the ones that always come into play tapped, getting a Scry trigger is not too bad. I would probably max out at 2 to 3 lands that always come into play tapped, so oftentimes temples are not necessarily making the cut. They are dirt cheap, so these are usually a mainstay in my more budget builds. Moving up to the C tier are the bicycle lands, named because they have 2 colors and have cycling. Clever, right? These are the first cycle that's not a complete cycle, meaning there isn't one for each color pair in the game. As such, these only count for the color pairing specifically for these cards, but I will still rank them according to playability within those color pairs. And these are okay, not great, not bad. They are probably the worst fetchable land, meaning they have basic land types, so effects that search for basic land types can search for these. Additionally, the cycling can come in handy, meaning these have a bit more versatility that I do kind of appreciate. I wasn't sure what these lands were informally called. I always called them deuce lands since it requires 2 basics to come into play untapped. Considering that I like to run around 10 basic lands in these 2 color strategies, I think these will come into play untapped a good chunk of the time. Now, not always, but a good chunk. Additionally, these have the same basic land types that make them searchable, which is a huge upside. I think that the reveal lands are slightly better than the deuce lands, since you don't need the lands in play just in your hand to reveal them, and you only need 1. Of course, there is the downside that these don't have basic land types, but I think these still edge out the deuces. Moving up to the B tier are the second group on the non-completed land cycles in the Horizon lands, named after the original of this cycle, Horizon Canopy. These can produce both colors of mana and will always come into play untapped. You will take damage while getting mana from these, so it ain't free. The sacrifice for a card draw is nice as you move into the mid and late stages of the game, where you generally have more mana than you need and you won't mind the loss of a land. I can hear it now, the throngs of people yelling. What about if they destroy the bounce land? Doesn't that set you back? Well, yes it does, but it also sets back whoever destroyed the land, while the rest of the table continues forward, which is not a great play from them considering all the uber powerful lands in Commander. Targeting your bounce land isn't that great. But yes, bounce lands are vulnerable, but they are also efficient at getting you essentially a phantom land draw, as well as resetting lands with a come into play trigger. Also, these are literally dirt cheap, so everyone has access to them, and that's a W for me. The Tainted Cycle is good. They come into play untapped and can provide both colors of mana if one of those colors happens to be black. That and these require specifically a swamp, not a basic of either of your colors. However, there isn't too much downside, making these totally serviceable. Again, these are dirt cheap, so they're great for budget decks featuring black. I refer to these as the Signet lands, as their text is the same as the guild signets, and they have similar downsides, the biggest being that you need another source of mana for these to produce anything at all. Granted, the cases where this is your only mana source are rare, but it does happen from time to time. Filter lands are nearly strict upgrades to the Signet lands. Not all the way, but close. You can get generic mana from these without another mana source. To get colored mana from it, you need to feed it a colored mana, but that's not a super difficult task. The ability to get double of the same color out of these makes it a bit easier to run spells with tons of the same mana in its casting cost. We pump it up to A tier with the check lands. These will look to see if you have at least one of two basic types to put into play untapped. As a reminder, this does not mean basic lands themselves, just any land with one of these particular types. Given the number of dual lands that have basic land types, and the number of basic lands that I will suggest on running, you will get this into play untapped a vast majority of the time. The Verge lands are actually just really good. They always come into play untapped, always generate at least one color of mana, and the check for the other type is dependent on two basic land types, not one like the Tainted Cycle. The only negative is they have no basic land types, so they can't contribute to stuff like your check lands. I could see these eventually moving up to S tier after some more play. Surveil lands may look a lot like the Scry lands. They are, in fact, not though. They are way better. You can search for these with the basic land type searchers, and they will count for your check land stuff. That's a huge bonus. Additionally, I think Surveil is slightly better than Scry in that it can help out lots of strategies, including Reanimation, Dredge, Delirium, and so on and so on. Now, I love me some slow lands. 99% of the time, these are just dual lands without the basic land types. The worst case scenario for these is having one of these and one other land in your opening hand, where you won't know if you'll have the second land to get the untapped land on turn 3. And even in that case, odds are you won't have a turn 1 play, so you could just raw dog this out into play tapped and it won't really affect you. These won't generally have any downside except in the most specific and unlikely situations. Bond lands are similar in that their only requirement is that at most one player has already been eliminated from the game. If you draw one of these after the game has gone to heads up, you are probably developed far enough to not worry about the comes into play tapped effect. We start the S tier off with my personal favorite in the Pain lands. They always come into play untapped and always can get you the color of mana that you need. Then later as the game goes on, you stop needing specific colors of mana, you can still just tap it for colorless to get around the ping. Seriously, play these and track how many times you actually take damage over the course of the game. It's way less than you think, if you pay attention to how you use your mana. Probably the most well-known are the Shock lands, which provide almost every upside you want with little downside, that you can always choose to not opt into and let it come into play tapped. They have basic land types, so they're searchable, and these get printed into standard on a fairly quick cadence, so depending on when you're looking to buy them and when they were last printed, you can usually find these relatively cheap. I have the fetch lands as the second best lands for 2 color mana bases, even though they produce no mana, which is kind of weird when you think about it. These can be used to accelerate landfall strategies as well as just fix mana, but they also hunt out effect-based lands. And what I mean by that is, for example, you can get one of your Surveil lands to get a Surveil, or even something like Mystic Sanctuary to get another spell on top of your library. The fact that these can be mana fixers, they can be effect tutors, and they can put themselves into the graveyard is wildly versatile. Now, one of the other advantages is that these lands are not color locked, and by that I mean they have no colored mana symbol, which means you can run fetch lands that say search for a mountain in your Azorius or Selesnya decks. And obviously the Kings are the original dual lands. They have basic land types, both of your mana is available right away, they're searchable, they're just the best. But I do want to make the point that while they are the best, they give you no substantial game advantage. Yes, they cost hundreds of dollars, but running them doesn't make your deck really that much more overpowered. It makes your mana base a bit more lenient and consistent, but not by much. Now we get to the all mana creators, and I'll just run down the list as there's only a few of them and rank them from best to worst, and we start with Command Tower. It's all colors for no cost, it's great. Reflecting Pool will get you any color you already have the potential for, so it by itself can get you mana for these Signet and Filter lands. Horizon of Progress is like a slightly better Horizon land, 1 damage for any color mana, you get the benefit of some slow ramp potential, and you can sacrifice it to draw a card. And I like Path of Ancestry, probably more than the average person. Yes, it always comes into play tapped, but it always gets you a color of mana that you need. And you can get multiple scries with it, even if you aren't focusing on a creature type in your deck. Remember, your commander shares a creature type with your commander. Mana Confluence and City of Brass are nearly identical. The only difference really is that between the two, if someone taps your Mana Confluence for non-mana purposes, you don't take any damage. Forbidden Orchard is solid. Not great, not bad. It's kind of just a crapshoot. In a 2-color deck, you generally have good odds to get at least one, if not both of your colors with this, and it's dirt cheap. It's like literally in every commander deck. Prismatic Vista in a lot of ways is worse than the Pathways. The Pathways force you to choose a land that provides just one color of mana, and so does Prismatic Vista, but at the cost of one life. Granted, you are thinning your deck by one card, you do get to shuffle your deck, and you do get a land into your graveyard. So if you want any of those secondary effects, or something like additional landfall triggers, then I would prioritize this higher in general. Tarnished Citadel is a lot like the Pain lands, but at 3 times the pain. Not really needed in 2-color decks. Starting Town is the last on the list of lands that I would consider running in a 2-color deck. Like, maybe if you have super friendly mulligan rules, then this starts to be a bit better. If I didn't mention a particular cycle or land, that doesn't mean it's unplayable, just that after the lands I mentioned, everything kinda starts blurring together in terms of quality. If you need to reach down to that level, then that's fine. Don't need to worry about ranking, just run what you have and have fun. Additionally, there are some lands that I didn't include because they are very singular. For example, Nimbus Maze and Mount Doom are both good for their respective color pairings, but they are the only types of those lands. The best way to try and catch some of these is to go onto Scryfall, and then advanced search, go to the type line and put in land. Then go to Commander Colors and click the colors of your commander. Then scroll down a bit to Formats, select Commander, hit search, and you'll get a list of every land that you could potentially run in that mana color pairing. This is something that I do when building a mana base and when looking for utility lands in basically every deck that I make. So what does the full ranking of these look like when the guild lands and the rest are combined into one pool? Well, it looks something like this. I'll hold on this frame in case you want to screenshot it or just have it burn into your retinas. Now, having seen that, what does an ideal mana base look like? Well, I suggest starting at 36 mana producing lands. You can adjust this according to the curve and average mana cost of your deck, but I would always start at 36. That's kind of the safest number that I would recommend. 6 to 8 of those should be utility lands. 20 of them should be lands that will produce both of your colors. And then 10 to 12 basic lands. Basic lands are basic lands, and I've gone through all the lands that I prefer to run that would produce the dual colors. But what exactly are utility lands? Essentially, they are lands whose primary purpose is to get you some sort of effect, but generated from a land, instead of a creature or artifact, spell, what have you. Wasteland is a good example of a common utility land to destroy other lands. Rogue's Passage is another that will generate colorless mana, but for an additional investment, it'll make a creature unblockable. However, there are certain cases like Boseiju Who Endures, Ancient Den, and Minamo School at Water's Edge, where these are not basic lands, but can be played in a very similar vein. They just come into play and provide a colored mana with some utility tacked on either in play or in your hand. If you want to cheap some of your basic lands out and put these in, I think that's usually fine, and sometimes a good way to stretch the diversity of your deck. If you like this video, feel free to check out another video that YouTube is going to suggest, because YouTube knows what you want to see, and it's always watching. And speaking of watching, thank you for watching, and I'll see you around.